Our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive. Welcome back, you're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. President Zelensky has called for the creation of a European army to fight the threat from Russia. Tonight, the UK Prime Minister has warned that the continent is facing a once-in-a-generation challenge. The family of a British couple detained in Iran while apparently on a motorbike tour have called for their safe return. 3 more Israeli hostages have been freed by Hamas, with another 369 Palestinian prisoners also released. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages of the newspapers as they come into us. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with broadcaster and commentator Alex Andreou and opinion and the features editor at City AM, Alice Denby. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, The Observer reports that Sir Keir Starmer is set to join a group of European leaders for an emergency meeting over Donald Trump's attempts to seize control of the Russia-Ukraine peace process. The Sunday Times says the Prime Minister is set to overrule the Chancellor, increasing defence spending after the US urged Ukraine to strike a peace deal with Russia. The Mail on Sunday says an army chief has claimed that Sir Keir Starmer risks heading for the dustbin of history if he doesn't increase defence spending. The Sunday Express says a new poll shows Brits are fearing for the economy and have delivered a damning record on Rachel Reeves' job as Chancellor. The Telegraph reports on a new controversy over government plans to give up sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. And the Sunday People leads with the investigation into a woman shot and killed on Valentine's Day in a pub in Kent. And we are joined tonight by Alex and Alice. Let's start off with The Observer. The headline there, Starmer set to join Europe Crisis Summit on Trump-Ukraine plan. This, we believe, the Prime Minister taking up the invitation from French President Emmanuel Macron to have these crisis talks in Paris. Alex, you kick us off.
This is after Zelensky basically called for Europe to get together and put together a European army to fill in the void that America looks like it's going to leave in the Ukrainian defense. This will obviously require a lot more spending. It will require significant more manufacturing capacity if Europe is to do that. And so I think there is a general sense, Donald Tusk has been making similar statements as well, that the message has been received, as it were. We're on our own.
That's very much what Zelensky was warning about, really, that Europe has to look after itself, and hence the need for a European army.
Yeah, absolutely. This feels like a very dark time. It feels like a real turning point in this conflict, that we are alone. We can't rely on America to defend us anymore, and that the whole of Europe really needs to step up to defend ourselves. There's a hot war on our continent, and we need to be much more serious about it than we have been. I think we've been complacent. Yeah. I think Trump's, shaken us out of it. But I also think it's very troubling that he seems to have just given Putin everything he wanted. He seems to be saying, well, the borders will be frozen as they currently are, so Putin gets 20% of Ukrainian territory and a guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO. You talk about the art of the deal. You don't just go in and give someone everything they want, especially when they're the aggressor.
Yeah. I think I've been talking to some intelligence contacts, and I think there's been a sense of shock, not because any of this was unpredictable. Everyone knew the general vibe that the Trump administration was giving about Ukraine. They were worried that he was going to try and stitch up a deal directly with Putin and cut Europe and Ukraine out of it. But I think what has shocked people was how unprofessional it has been as a negotiating outfit. Like Pete Hegseth going to the Munich conference, he basically sat down at the poker table with his cards facing the wrong way. And you can't then ask people to unsee what you're holding in your hand. And then that speech by J.D. Vance on the last day, which was completely tone deaf, had nothing to do with defense and security, actually, I think has shocked people, not because, as I said, the policy positions were unpredictable, they were largely expected, but because there is a renewed sense of urgency that they cannot trust this administration to conduct the negotiations at all, practically.
Alice, what do you think will be the outcome from this meeting that we spoke about in Paris on Monday with European leaders that Macron has called?
I mean, it looks like we are going to see many more European leaders, including Britain, commit to increasing defence spending. That's surely a good thing. And I just wanted to pick up on this J.D. Vance speech, because what I do think was so strange about that speech was just it was very America first, right? He was standing on the international stage insulting our country, and I think it just showed. I mean, it's not like as a result of that speech now everyone's talking about abortion buffer zones. They're talking about how they can't trust this American administration because they're so concerned with sort of misinformation they seem to be reading on X and then spouting on the stage in Munich. So basically we can't trust America because they seem deranged.
I mean, Roger Wicker is a senior senator. He's the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He's a Republican. He's a Trump loyalist. He was the senator who handheld Hegseth through his confirmation hearing, right? So this is not someone that's going off the reservation. And when he saw the speech by Hegseth, he said it was a rookie speech and that only a fool would have given and delivered that. And this is a Trump loyalist. So I think, you know, the concern back looking at Hegseth as a pick was that he was incredibly inexperienced for running such a huge and important department. They vote him in, and then 2 weeks later, he does exactly what was warned, and everyone is acting surprised while they're voting through RFK Jr. for health, again with similar concerns. And in 2 weeks' time, when RFK Jr. turns around and says something outrageous about vaccines, they'll all be going, wow, we didn't expect that. But, you know, this was not just predictable, it was predicted.
Returning to Ukraine and the whole issue of defence spending, something that the European nations, I think, acknowledge that they all need to spend more money on. The Mail on Sunday, we've got our Army Chief here, a retired Army Lord Dannatt, saying that Sir Keir Starmer will be consigned to the history books for being a dustbin of history. Dustbin of history because he's not spending what he should be on defence.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear, this is not entirely on Keir Starmer's place. Successive governments have run down our military capacity. But, I mean, of course, Lord Dannatt's absolutely right. We do need to be spending more on defence, and we need to be prepared to defend ourselves. And what I do think is interesting as well about the idea of defence spending is, well, but the economy is flatlining. Where are we going to get this money from? What are we going to cut in order to spend this money? And then we see, again, on the front page of the Times, that Keir Starmer's planning to overrule his own Chancellor, who, you know, David Lammy was saying at this Munich conference that she was being the brake on ramping up defence spending. She's now being overruled. That puts her in a really difficult position because, at the same time, the OBR has halved its growth forecast, completely knocking out her fiscal headroom. So where's she going to get this money from? What taxes is she going to raise? What spending is she going to cut? And how are the British people going to feel this in their pockets?
I mean, defence spending doesn't have to be a minus on the balance sheet. Like, if you spend it into the economy, if you switch some production capacity and spend it into the economy, it can actually boost your GDP. So let's see. But, you know, for sure, we need to boost this. This is a dangerous inflection point for Europe. For sure, we should have done this quite some years ago, because it was obvious what was happening, that the tectonic plates were shifting. But I have to slightly push against the ahistorical American view that they've been paying for our defense for decades. You know, the US took the role of world leader for very specific reasons that benefited them massively, not least of which was the dollar becoming reserve currency for the world, which yields giant benefits for them. And the only time Article 5 has been invoked was when the two towers were attacked. So, you know, it's not like this has been happening all the time. It hasn't. It's simply not true. I was speaking to Belgian veterans a couple of months ago that fought in Vietnam, you know, and a Gloucester regiment that fought in Vietnam. It's not like the US is constantly fighting our wars and nothing goes the other way. I think that's a very Trump view. Let's just say that.
We're looking at that headline in the Sunday Times, that what we've spoken about, that the Prime Minister to overrule Rachel Reeves. I mean, this is not a headline that she will welcome, and it further undermines her, doesn't it?
Yeah, she's been having a really bad time recently. This comes on top of various stories about her misusing expenses in a previous job, about lying on her CV, and frankly, I mean, those things are trivial compared to how badly the economy is performing as a result of her budget. So her increases in national insurance companies are really harming small businesses. Growth in the economy is completely flat, and business confidence is absolutely in the tank. So Rachel Reeves, I think, is really in trouble here. And I think possibly resignation watch.
Really?
Possibly.
We're also seeing in the Sunday Telegraph, David Lammy battles Reeves over defence funds as well.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't good news for Reeves. I would gently suggest that some of the economic signs are positive. They're not all negative. GDP is anemic but growing. The IMF prediction for the UK is more positive than it was before. The Bank of England prediction for the economy is actually more positive than it was before, even though it's a downgrade, because basically it is last year that performed worse than they predicted. But the forward-looking bit is actually a point to upgrade to what they thought last time. So it's not all negative. But she is in trouble, because when you see a headline like that, it means that the Prime Minister reckons they can make political capital out of overruling her, which it really doesn't bode well for her future.
Yeah.
And I think this is bad news for the government as a whole, because Reeves and Starmer were sort of so hand in hand, and the central promise of this government was to get the economy growing. And now that relationship seems to be really fracturing. You know, she was meant to be the Iron Chancellor. She's so central to this agenda. And now that is looking to fall apart. And, you know, if you lose a Chancellor, a government doesn't usually survive very long.
Meanwhile, in the Express, according to their figures and their polls, Britons have delivered a damning verdict on Rachel Reeves' record as Chancellor, with just 15% saying she's doing a good job, 2/3 stating she was wrong to strip all but the poorest pensioners of winter fuel payments. So, seemingly, according to the Express, the public are not behind her either.
Yeah, I mean, that's not exactly surprising. There's been a steady drip of incredibly negative stories. So, you know, it's a chicken and egg situation. The more, I think, she goes into this kind of spiral, the more difficult it will be for her to recover. And I would agree that it's sort of resignation watch, simply because of the timing. Because I think if you want to replace the Chancellor, you would do it before the statement in March and the departmental spending review in the spring. Because it makes zero sense to appoint someone without an opportunity to put their own mark on an economic plan. So she will either last the Parliament or she will go next month.
We shall see, we shall see. You said it here on this programme. Alex and Alice, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, in tomorrow's Sunday Express, could the UK's biggest airport soon be renamed after the late Queen Elizabeth? Stay with us.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash.
Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes. Sky News, the full story first. I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
This is insane. This was a bustling residential area.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Katie Spencer, and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
I'm Lisa Dowd, and I'm one of Sky's Midlands correspondents. The reason I do this job is because you never know where it's going to lead.
The Premier League is exclusively on Peacock. Two of the league's biggest clubs find themselves at the wrong end of the table.
And the mood turns extremely sour.
Desperately chasing a win to turn their season around.
It's a beautiful finish.
Tottenham Hotspur.
To Eriksen. Back towards Amma.
Manchester United. This is the Premier League. February 16, only on Peacock.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks. I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, broadcaster and commentator Alex Andreou and the opinion and features editor at City AM, Alice Denby. Right, let's have a look at the Telegraph and this story regarding the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. This following on from a speech by J.D. Vance in which he claimed free speech in the UK was in retreat. Kemi Badenoch is in complete agreement with him, Alex.
Yes, I think if there's a wrong political choice to be made, you can trust Kemi Badenoch to make it. I mean, this is just nonsense. This is basically refracted nonsense, not even nonsense. This is Elon Musk getting his news from Twitter trolls and then Chinese whispering it to, Vance, who decides to make it his keynote speech at a security conference. I can't even critique it. It's so ridiculous to suggest that Russia and China are less of a threat than, the notion that freedom of expression is under threat in this country. And all this done at the very moment the White House was banning the Associated Press from the Oval Office and Air Force One for still using Gulf of Mexico to describe the Gulf of Mexico because they talk to an international audience. So they can't suddenly call it Bob just because.
Well, that wasn't the alternative name. We know what the alternative name was. But interesting that Kemi Badenoch has chosen to align herself with what has been said. She's saying that, warning that the silencing of freedom of speech could backfire and mean that false ideas thrive unchallenged.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain strain of thinking on the British right that loves this Trump agenda, even when JD Vance, as I say, stands on international stages insulting our country. I think it's a really worrying trend among certain kind of right-winger to be this enthusiastic about Trump when he's made it so clear, it could not be clearer that he is not our friend. And yeah, I mean, I think for Kemi Badenoch to be sort of again going in on culture war issues instead of any substantive policy, I just think is really disappointing. I think she needs, the only policy that the Conservatives have announced is opposing a perfectly sensible reform to winter fuel allowance. This is a benefit that goes to millionaires. That is not something Conservatives should be supporting. And yeah, I think this is disappointing stuff from her.
Let's move to The Observer and this story about Google. They've cooperated with autocratic regimes around the world, including the Kremlin in Russia and the Chinese Communist Party, to facilitate censorship requests. Yeah. So we read.
I mean, my reaction to this is, duh. we sort of know that big companies, I mean, these are huge markets. And, companies tend to and should actually, the fact that Elon Musk, for instance, does not respect national laws within territories in which X operates is a problem. Brazil got to the point where they had to ban X until he basically relented to the Supreme Court judgment over there and agreed to apply the laws of that country. So, yes, it is worrying because we have a particular view of the regime in China. It is autocratic, it is focused on, suppressing free speech, all of that. So it is worrying that Google are working with them, but Google are working with every government in every territory they operate to make sure they don't fall foul of national laws.
But is it surprising, though, Alice, that seemingly Google are participating in censorship?
I'm not really sure what to make of this story. I mean, The Observer does have a bit of a fixation on big tech being scary. So I'm not quite sure what to make of this. I mean, yeah, I don't think Google should be getting involved in censorship, but I'm not really sure that that's what this amounts to. I'm not very clear.
Well, I mean, the piece is suggesting that it's engaging with countries that are wanting information removed.
Yeah.
That's fact, historical fact, but they want it removed from their platforms.
Sure. But Google is more transparent than, say, any kind of Chinese company. If, you look at the DeepSeek, the Chinese AI that doesn't know about Tiananmen Square, Google is clearly in a better position than that.
Yeah, I would also say, when you search on Google now, you will regularly get a message that some results have been removed because of EU regulations. I mean, could that not be presented in exactly the same way by a Chinese newspaper to say, oh, look, Google is working with the Europeans to remove stuff they don't like?
Yeah, no, interesting point. Well made. We've just got a minute to talk about Heathrow potentially being renamed QE2 after the late Queen Elizabeth. Good idea, Alice?
Yes, I like this idea. I think at the moment it sounds a bit like it's named after a sort of famous grumpy Tory Prime Minister from the 60s. So I think the Queen would be a much better name for it. I think more things in Britain should be named after Queen Elizabeth. The Elizabeth line's one of London's, best innovations, a huge success, and that's partly got to be because of the name, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against it, but Terminal 5 is already called the Queen Elizabeth Terminal, and I think people would find the change very, very hard. Like Heathrow is a really well-established name, especially for airline staff, especially for pilots. I mean, would you change the LHR to LQE, maybe?
New York changed its main airport to JFK Airport in the 60s.
Well, renaming stuff is in vogue. I think we should rename it the Gulf of Mexico, just to annoy.
You tease. Alex and Alice, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. Stay with us for the news at 11. Much more to bring you then.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.